How's it going, everybody? Cameron here with Canadian Gamer, coming at you with another video. Picked up some new shades recently. Some Oakley gas cans. I want to do a rant on sunglasses, talking about why it's not worth it to buy cheap sunglasses or expensive sunglasses, pros and cons. So keep a lookout for that video. We'll be putting that out shortly. So I have been busy. That's why I haven't been putting out a lot of content. My God. I've been playing Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. I'm about halfway through the game on the Nintendo Switch. It's a long game for me. Chipping away at it. So that'll be the next review whenever I get that game done. I'm enjoying it, but it is a long game. Anywho. Today's topic of conversation, we are talking about the Sega Dreamcast, which I have right here. Now, I've got a nice console right here as far as the condition is concerned, because a lot of the Dreamcasts out there have suffered the same fate as a lot of the other consoles that were a gray plastic of the day, namely the PS1 and even the Super Nintendo. They've just gone completely yellow over time, and a lot of the times, contrary to what you may read or hear on the internet, you can't restore the plastic. Once it's gone, it's gone. Once it goes completely yellow, you're pretty much screwed. So this one here I picked up several years ago off of Kijiji, and I brought it home, and there's an issue with the laser, so it doesn't read discs. So I was thinking about getting it modded so I can put an SD card in it. Again, not really going to talk about that too much today, but you know, the Dreamcast, I've got a story to tell, and I've actually talked about it before on the channel, but you may have not seen that video before in the past. The Dreamcast, in a lot of ways, suffered the same fate as what Xbox is going through right now as far as the brand is concerned. Oh, so let's just backtrack a bit here. The reason why we're talking about the Dreamcast today is because today is the 25th anniversary. Hard to believe it's been 25 years since the Dreamcast had its North American launch on September 9th of 1999? 1999, yeah. So, we're here to talk about the Dreamcast because there's some misconceptions. A lot like the Sega Saturn. A lot of you guys out there, guys and gals, are walking around with rose-tinted glasses, and you're acting like you're all nostalgic for these old consoles, when it's just simply not the case, folks. Simply not the case. So, the luxury of being as old as I am, I can at least tell you guys firsthand, I was there back then, in that era. Mid to late 90s, okay? And so to really understand, you know, why the Dreamcast, in my humble opinion, is extremely overrated, you have to actually go back further. You have to go back to the 5th gen. So at the time, I had a Sega Saturn on launch, okay? On launch. And I had that thing before anyone had an N64 or even a PS1, because at that time, those consoles hadn't even hit the market yet. So I get the Saturn, and it comes with a janky, botched version of Virtual Fighter, which is the stupidest pack-in game you could ever put in a console, because it has limited replay value, and most gamers out there, you know, as far as the casual audience is concerned, for a pack-in game, you couldn't pick a worse title. It's right up there with Altered Beast on the Sega Genesis. And then, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog came as a pack-in on the Genesis, and that basically righted the ship, right? So the same thing with the Saturn. It comes with the stupidest pack-in game. There's hardly any games available on launch. There's like Clockwork Knight, Daytona USA, a couple other games. You could clearly tell the games were rushed, okay? The graphics were terrible pop-in. You know, the developers weren't using the tools available to them to exploit what the Saturn could necessarily do with graphics. So, yeah, just a terrible launch. And then when the PS1 came out, that was just something else. All the magazines, like Electronic Gaming Monthly, were hyping up the PS1. And at the time, one of the first games was Battle Arena Toshinden. Again, looking back on it, maybe not the greatest game. Not even as good as Virtual Fighter. But at the time, the graphics were really impressive. When you saw what that game looked like compared to Virtual Fighter, it wasn't exactly helping the Saturn any. And so anyways, the rest is history. The PS1 started getting all these awesome third-party games and third-party support from Squaresoft. You know, the Crash Bandicoot games, the ESPN games. At the time, in period, they were popular. Jet Moto. So, then the 64 comes out, and at least where I was back in the day, where I was living, to be honest with you, even though the PS1 became more popular than the 64, most of the kids in my neighborhood had a 64. So you had a lot of people with a 64. You know, we were playing 4-player couch co-op, literally sitting on a carpet in my buddy's living room with 4 controllers plugged in, playing 4-screen Diddy Kong Racing, Mario Kart, and GoldenEye. Those were like the 3 games. So we had all that going on, and then the PlayStation, you know, was just doing incredible things because a lot of the games that didn't come to the 64s because of the cartridge-based format. A lot of developers didn't want to go that route. It was cheaper to go CD-based, so a lot of the best games came to the PS1. The reason why I say all that is because the Saturn, again, we don't need to rehash it here, but it was a complete failure in North America. Okay? Kind of like what happened with the Xbox One. Okay, it came out, they said it was going to be, you had to have it hooked up to the internet at all times. It had to be hooked up to Kinect. You know, the Xbox One was such a terrible unveil, terribly received, One, I don't think we need to argue it. Xbox has never really recovered from that. And, you know, that there's a trickle-down effect, and that's affected the perception of the brand as far as sales are concerned of the Xbox Series console. And now you're seeing Microsoft is more of a software-based company, right? They're not really so focused on hardware sales. Same thing happened with Sega. They completely screwed up the Sega Saturn launch in North America, and they never recovered from it, okay? So when the Dreamcast came out, a lot of the magazines were talking about it, but as far as the general public is concerned, I don't care what John Hancock says. I don't care what all these other people say. There was a little bit of excitement the day it came out. That's about it. We had moved on from the brand. Sega ruined their reputation because of the Sega Saturn. Beyond repair. Beyond repair. So the Dreamcast was too little too late. And the thing is it didn't even matter if you bought this back in the day. It did not even matter. Because as good as the hardware was in this console, it did not have the games to back it up. It didn't. Whereas the 64, to a lesser degree than the PS1, the 64 had a lot of good games. First-party games. Not a lot, but it had enough, right? It had Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Mario 64, 1080 Snowboarding, Diddy Kong Racing. We can go on and on and on and on and on. The PS1 had Final Fantasy VII, Gran Turismo. Again, we don't need to go on and on and on about the PS1 library. But the PS1 library was so compelling. Back in the day, it was a more attractive proposition to have a 64 or a PS1 over a Dreamcast. It was. So I knew one guy, a friend of mine, and he got one of these. He got it the day it came out. And he called me. He's like, come on over. He's like, I got it. So I went on over. And he showed me his Dreamcast. And I saw the controller. And the console looked very alien to me because I'd never seen it before. And I don't remember the name of it, but he had like a launch title. It was like a snowboarding game. And visually, as far as the graphics are concerned, it looked impressive compared to a PS1 and a 64. But that's it. The game was just a snowboarding game, right? And then you started to see the cracks forming, in the ceiling or in the floor, however you want to put it. We got the Sonic Adventure and a couple of other games, Crazy Taxi. But like, again, where's the good games? Where are the killer apps? Okay, so the thing is you'll see people out there that act all nostalgic over the Dreamcast, but at least, again, based on my own accord, based on living in Ontario, Canada in 1999, nobody had a Dreamcast. We were all on the PS1 hype train still, but the PS2 soon to come out. Go back and look at the Dreamcast library, okay? Unless you're into 2D fighting games or some of the arcade ports from Sega, let's be honest here, folks. Let's be honest here. The Dreamcast catalog of games is not very good. It's not. It's paper thin. Okay? There's nothing really that compelling on the Dreamcast. There's a couple of UFC games. You've got that Seaman game. It's just really, really, really overhyped. And it was too little too late. And what happened with Sega is, in order to survive, they became basically a software-based company. Just like Xbox, right? It's funny how the two companies are living in parallel lines, right? Because a lot of people would say the OG Xbox is a spiritual successor to the Dreamcast. In a lot of ways, the brand Xbox, it has become a spiritual successor to Sega, because Xbox is more of a software-based company now than it is a hardware. But don't be fooled, folks. The Dreamcast is not that great of a console. It's one of the sexiest looking consoles of all time. It looks incredible. Okay? I'm happy to have it in my collection. I would like to somehow get this repaired or modified. But it's not that good of a console. It's just not. It's just not. There's nothing to celebrate about this, okay? This is actually, if anything, today would be a moment to mourn, okay? Because this was basically the nail in the coffin. This is what did the company in. Now Sega still exists, obviously, owned by another company, Sammy, but not the same company as it once was. And for all you people out there that are asking for Sega to release a Dreamcast Mini, okay, that's not going to happen. It's not. And the reason why it's not going to happen, a couple of reasons. Sega could just as easily release a lot of these Dreamcast games as digital downloads, separate releases on modern consoles, and they make more money than releasing a miniature Dreamcast. But at the same time, there's really not that much nostalgia for the Dreamcast, not as much as you would think. If they released this at retail, I don't think it would really sell that hot. And the Dreamcast is similar to the N64. That's why you're not getting an N64 Mini. It's because the library of games is kind of weak. It is. It's weak. It's weak. So the only argument you could possibly have with the Saturn and the Dreamcast is maybe there was a stronger library of games, more success with this console over in other areas of the world. But yeah, I don't see why there would be a reason to celebrate the Dreamcast. This was basically the nail in the coffin. And it's all because of the Sega Saturn that this failed, right? Let's be honest here. A lot of the third-party developers and publishers out there, they abandoned Sega at this point because Sega, their trust had been broken with the Saturn. Nobody wanted to go near the Dreamcast and run the risk of developing or publishing a game for the Dreamcast and no financial return, right? However unfortunate you guys want to view that, that's the truth. So, when you look at the Dreamcast library of games, it's not a shocker that most of the good games were actually developed in-house by Sega. So yeah, 25 years of the Dreamcast. Hard to believe it's been 25 years. Again, I don't really like looking back on this console. It's a dark period as far as the gaming industry is concerned as a whole. It's a very dark period. This is what buried the company as a hardware company. And there was a lot of mistakes made with this console as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. Namely, there wasn't good launch titles when this console came out. There just wasn't. And yeah, it's the story of Sega, right? Tripping over their own feet constantly. Good Lord. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Leave in the comments below what are your thoughts on the Sega Dreamcast as we mourn today. Anyways, guys, I'll be back with something in a couple of days. Maybe even tonight. We'll see. That's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good night.